Okay, so if you've been following me, you know that I've been all about Tailwind CSS lately. And the reason for that is because I'm physically blown away at how powerful it is. So with that, this video, I'm going to show you how to properly install Tailwind CSS in a React.js application. And of course, we're always going to use Docker containers for this. So part of this video, I'm also going to show you how to spin up a Docker. And first, we're going to spin it up in version 14, and then we are going to upgrade it to version 20. And I'm going to show you that. And there's the reason I'm showing you that is because as a developer, you might run into that issue. But in this video, I'll show you how to properly do that. So with that said, let's check it out. Let me show you how to properly install React.js in a Docker environment. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe button. I do post videos like this on a weekly, daily, monthly basis. And with that, let's jump into it. Okay, so first thing first, we want to create that Visual Studio environment. We also want to create that Docker environment. So let's jump into it. The first thing I want to do is I want to open up an actual folder that we are going to have our entire project reside in. And normally, like I recommend in all my videos, you want to create a repo folder that you are going to put in all of your projects. But for simplicity matters, I just use a temp folder for the YouTube videos. And the first thing I want to do is create an actual folder. And this is where everything is going to reside in. So I'm just going to say React Tailwind project. Perfect. So now that we have that React Tailwind project, we are going to open it up. All right, so now it's going to ask you, do you trust it? Obviously, we trust it because it is our local dev environment. Next, I want to show you on the left-hand side, we do have our Explorer, our folder or our file Explorer on the left-hand side. You're not going to see anything within this folder right now. But with that said, let's open up a new terminal and let's get things going here. So the first thing I want to do is I actually want to create our Tailwind project. So I have the Get Started with Tailwind CSS up and running here, ready to go. But going back to the terminal, the first thing we're going to do is we are going to create our actual React.js application. So to do that, we're going to type in npx and we are going to say create a React. And we're going to say app and we're going to give it a name. So I'm just going to say React project Tailwind. Now you can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to give it that name and we're going to hit enter. So what's going to happen now is it's going to install the entire React application for us. And specifically, our project name is React Project Tailwind. That is important. So memorize that. By the way, I am going to copy a few things back and forth here, but I recommend that you literally type it out. It's definitely going to help you to get used to coding, and it's also going to help you just to be a better developer overall. All right, so on the left-hand side, in the folder Explorer, you're going to see that our React project has successfully installed a couple of files here. We have our package.json file. We also have our src and our public file and our node modules file. So this really at this point looks pretty good. Now the next step is I want to navigate into the actual folder that we just created. So I'm going to say cd react and we're going to say project and Tailwind. Now we're actually in the folder itself. Okay, so now that we are in this folder, the next step is we want to install Tailwind. Now I am going to copy and paste it. Again, I recommend you to literally type it out. It's going to help you a lot. Like I said, I'm going to copy it from the Tailwind documentation and we're going to drop it in here and I'm going to get that to properly install. So this normally takes a second. Everything is installed. That is good. The next step is I want to create that Tailwind project file. And so we're going to copy this and we also going to paste that into our terminal. And essentially what that's going to do, it's going to create that Tailwind config file.js that we are going to need for the project. Now that I have this open, there's one thing that we do need to add for this all to properly work, and that is modifying the actual content. So we want to put this specifically in here for everything to work. If you want me to explain a little bit more about this, drop in the comments below and I will respond to that comments, of course. Now that we have that, I am going to hit save. And we're going to close this for now. now. And now that we have done that, we physically need to add the base components and utilities to our CSS file. So I'm going to open up src and we are going to look for Index.css. By default, React comes with some base CSS, so we're going to get rid of that. And we are going to copy in the actual Tailwind CSS components. So when we scroll down to the documentation, it's going to be right here. So I'm going to copy that right there and go back to Visual Studio Code, and we're going to drop it in there. We're going to hit save. So now we have successfully created our directives for Tailwind to properly work. All right, so now that that's done, the next step is we are going to create our Dockerfile. Now I am working specifically on a Mac or a Linux box. Now, if you're working on Windows, there's two options here. To create a file or a folder, you can right click and just say create new file or folder, or you can activate WSL on your Windows machine, which means that you can physically run a Linux box within your Windows machine. But for that said, we are going to use touch, which is creating a file. So I'm going to say touch and we're going to say Dockerfile. And therefore on the left-hand side, you're going to see that it created a Dockerfile. Now with that all done, we want to add our Docker stuff in here. The first thing I want to do is I want to create a from node. So I want to specify what type of node this is. So it's going to be a stable version, which is version 14. Then next we need to define where the work directive or directory is of our project itself. So I'm just going to put it in the app, which is a pretty common place to do. Once we've done that, the next one is we want to pre-install our package.json. So the reason we copy or install it prior is because of caching services for Docker itself. With that done, we want to run npm install. So when we put run npm install in our Docker file, essentially what's happening is Docker is going to install all the necessary node modules for our whole project to work properly. All right, so with that done, the next step is we're gonna copy everything in this directory and this folder into our Docker container. All right, so that is done. The next step is exposing a port. So I'm going to expose a default port of 3000, and we are going to add npm start as well. All right, so with that done, we have configured our Docker file. Everything looks good the way it's supposed to, so I can close it up. We're good with that. Now that that's all done, we are going to build this Docker environment, and we're going to do the following. So in the terminal, we are going to say Docker, we're going to say build, and we're going to say T, and we're going to say React project Tailwind. Okay, so you'll see that I got a little error, and this is quite common. And the reason I'm getting this error is because I forgot that little dot at the end, or the little period. That is super important for everything to work the way it's supposed to. Always remember that little period. That is something that even an experienced developer like me kind of forgets sometimes, but now that is properly inserted, you're going to see that it's properly installing our Docker container. Now, one thing you're going to note, this sometimes does take a bit, and the reason for that is because it's installing all the node modules and it's installing everything it requires for it to run properly. Again, what we're doing right here is we are creating a standalone containerized Docker for our entire project to work. All right, so now everything is looking good. We have the whole thing built, and normally it says, okay, what's next? What do you want to do? But I normally just ignore that because I have a specific way of doing it. So, all right, so next thing is we are going to physically run our Docker environment. So we're going to say Docker run, and I'm going to say D, and then I'm going to open up a port, and I'm going to open up port 3000. And once that is done, let's give this specific Docker container name. So I'm just going to call it React Tailwind CSS project. Wow, that is a long name. And with that done, we're just going to say, okay, React project Tailwind. Wow, I am typing quite slow today. All right, so once that's done, we're gonna hit enter, and there we go. When you see that, that means that Docker is running. So on the left-hand side, I do have the Docker extension of Microsoft installed on my Visual Studio Code, and when you look at it, you'll see that it is running properly. Now, another little thing that I have also installed is Docker Desktop. So when I open that up and I go to my containers, you're gonna see that React Tailwind CSS project is running properly. So everything looks good. Now we're gonna take our Visual Studio Code and we're gonna connect to our actual Docker environment. So to do that, we're gonna go back to Visual Studio Code and we're gonna right click and we are gonna attach our Visual Studio to that specific project. All right, so now that's good. We have our Visual Studio right here, which is our base that we just worked on. But now we have another Visual Studio Code, and this specific Visual Studio Code is physically connected to our Docker environment, which is perfect. So to know if a Visual Studio window is physically connected to your Docker environment, at the bottom left here, you're gonna see a little green, and it's basically saying, hey, you are connected to the Docker itself. So just quickly opening up the Docker desktop again, we can see everything is running. We can see we have an image here, or I have multiple images, but you would only have one. And so everything at this point is looking pretty good start. All right, so the next step is we want to open up the specific folder that our project or our application is residing in. So I'm gonna say open folder, and we're gonna click the little two dots, and where I specifically wanna go is the app, and there's our app. So everything is there, and we're gonna hit okay. There we go. This normally takes a second, but then in the file explorer, you're gonna see everything. Everything that we had is right there. So this, what we have right here, is perfect. Now with all that, we are gonna run our project. So I'm gonna open up a new terminal, and let's just open this up. So with this terminal opened up, you're gonna notice that we are physically within the Docker container, super powerful. And now we're gonna say npm and we're gonna hit start. This is a common thing that is gonna happen is because we're already using port 3000 for our Docker environment, it's gonna say, hey, port 3000 is already being used. Would you like a different port instead? We're gonna say, yeah, let's do it. Let's use a different port. Now, when you do that, I'm just gonna go back to Visual Studio Code. You're gonna see that it's using port 3001. So everything is running the way it should be. So if I go back to Safari, you're gonna see everything is running perfectly and it's running smoothly. So I'm just gonna copy this and I'm going to open this up in my Edge browser. I prefer Edge. Drop in the comments below. Let me know what browser you like the most. Like I like Edge, just been using it for so many years, especially when they started adapting the Chromium engine. Anyway, that's a different discussion for a different day. All right, so everything is working nicely now. The next step is we want to actually get our Tailwind to work in our App.js file. Now, a couple of things. I have two tabs open here, and the one that I have open is the Tailwind UI. Now, to get to this specific page, just Google Tailwind UI. I've also dropped the URL of this specific page in the description below of this video. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to duplicate a specific part of the code examples on this page, and the one I want to do is this one right here. So when we look at the code, it's going to show you the HTML. Obviously, we are working with the React application, so we are going to look at React. So a couple of things here. It's saying that it wants to import headless UI and Euro icons. So I'll show you in a bit how to properly install that. But before we do that, I just want to add a git ignore to our specific Docker environment. And we already have one by default, so it already created a couple of things here. So we just want to review and make sure that we have everything added to it. And there's a few that I do want to add though. So it has node modules, which is fine. It has DS store, especially if you work on a Mac, that is important. And one thing I just want to add here is I just want to add environment in general. So .environment like that in general, that is perfect. All right, so now that that's done, the next step is we want to copy that code that we have on the Tailwind UI page. Now, first things first, we want to open up our src and we want to open up the app.js. Now you're going to see that we do have two imports already, but I'm going to get rid of that. We're going to go back to the Tailwind UI. We're going to copy what they have right here. So we're going to import those specifically. So I'm going to drop it in there. We're going to hit save, and you're going to notice it's going to give you a bunch of errors here at the bottom, which is fine for now. We're not going to worry about that for now. The next step is we want to copy these functions as well. So if we open it up, we're going to see there's a couple of things here. And what this is doing is it's defining the menu navigation here. It's defining Buddy's image there. So we're going to take this and we're going to copy it as is. So I'm going to take that. We're gonna copy that to our app.js. So we're gonna copy it right above our function app. We're gonna hit save. I'm just gonna minimize this for now. And just to avoid a bunch of errors here at the bottom, I'm gonna hit Control-C and just stop our project for now. I'm gonna show you why here in a little bit. Next, I'm going to copy this class name function. The reason why we wanna do that is because we are using class name throughout the entire project. Okay, so we're gonna take that and we're gonna copy that in there as well. Okay, so next, when we look at the code that they're presenting, they're saying that in the HTML and body tags, we do need to add these class names for this thing to render properly. So let's do that. I'm gonna copy the class, go back to VS Code, and we are gonna go into the public folder into Index.html, and we're gonna add this class in the HTML tags right there. And we're gonna do the same for body as well, because body has h-full. So I'm going to copy that and we are going to drop it into our body. I just got to look for our body. Our body is right there. Perfect. Okay. Now that that's done, we're going to close index.html. Now with all this, we are going to copy everything here. So we're going to copy all of this code. So I'm just going to slowly get it to drag down to the bottom. And we're just going to take everything, take all of this. I'm just going to copy it. Okay, copy it, and within our function app, we want to make sure we keep return, but we're going to minimize all of this and we're going to take that and drop it in here and we're going to hit save. Now, if you run this right here, right now, you are going to get an error, and the error you're going to get is because we're using headless UI. So let's run it. Let's see what happens. I want to show you this error that you're going to get, and it's going to ask you for the port again. We're just going to say, yeah, sure, go ahead. And it is when we go back to Visual Studio Code, you're going to see that it has those specific errors that I'm referring to. So it's essentially saying that it can't resolve headless and it can't resolve Euro. So we do need to install this properly. So with that, I'm going to stop this application and we're going to hit Control-C to get it to stop properly. Now that it's stopped, let's quickly install that. So what we want to specifically install, and again, I copied this because I don't want the video to be hours and hours long, but I recommend you to type this out yet again. So I'm going to paste this in. And essentially what I pasted in there is npm install headless UI /React, as well as Euro icons. All right, so with that installed, we do have a couple of errors here. So let's see if we can get this to run with these errors. Otherwise, we are going to try and reinstall it again. So I'm gonna hit start. We're gonna open up a port, and we do have those errors again. So which means that the previous way of installing this didn't work properly. Now, part of the reason why we might get this issue is because we are running Node version 14. So we have to change this to Node version 20. So to do that, we would need to exit our entire environment. So I'm going to close this Visual Studio Code. And with that closed, we also going to stop our actual Docker container. So I'm going to right click and hit stop. I am going to open up the Docker desktop. Now, if you ask yourself, why are we going through all this? This is pretty normal as a web developer. You kind of go through this kind of tedious stuff. So we have to make a few changes. So I am going to open up my Visual Studio again right here. And one thing I want to change is this right here. We are going to change that to version 20, and let's see if that solves our issue. So I'm going to hit save. And this, by the way, is not the actual Visual Studio Code that's connected to the Docker, but the other one that we worked in. So with that done, I'm going to hit save, and we are going to rebuild this Docker so that we can get it to use version 20 of our entire Node version and not 14. I started version 14 just because it's normally a stable version, but it's a quite older version as well. So with this, we are going to use version 20, which is going to be the latest. So with that all said, it is rebuilding our entire Docker environment. All right, so now that it's done, we basically rebuilded our entire Docker. One little side now, because we've upgraded from 14 to 20 and I deleted the Docker itself or the Docker environment, we are going to start over, but I'm going to show you a quick way of getting this all done. And we are going to recode some of the things, but it's all muscle memory. If you redo it, you're going to get better at it. All right, so with that said, we are going to run the Docker again. So we are going to say run Docker. So just use the up arrow to get to your previous commands. And I'm going to open up Docker Desktop because I just want to have a quick look and make sure that it is running perfectly, which it is right there. Now that it's running, we can connect and attach our Visual Studio Code to it again. And when we connect to it, it should automatically connect to where we want it to connect. So we don't need to go and define that folder structure again. All right, so with that all said, we want to go back to App.js and we would need to go and add those items again. So I'm going to open up the browser and we're quickly going to add those items again. So literally taking all of this, we're just going to copy it and drop it in right at the top. We're going to hit save. And next we want to go back to that index.html. We just want to add that class names again. So the ones that I want to add is the one at HTML, which is the one we did previously. So just quickly going to HTML and adding that, which will be perfect, hitting save. And the same I want to do for the body tag as well. So we're going to take that and we're going to copy it. So looking for our body tag, which is normally here at the bottom, we're just going to drop it in there. We're going to hit save. So at this stage, we have added that. The next, we want to clear out the app return right here and we want to add what they say right here. So I'm going to quickly add those as well. So I'm just using the scroll of my mouse to quickly get all of that. And we're just going to take it right there and hit copy. And we're going to drop it in right there. Now that we've done that though, we quickly want to install that headless UI again. So we're going to try it again. Now that we have version 20. So if I go node V, we can see we have version 20 and I'm going to drop in and install npm install headless as well as your icon. So we're going to get that to quickly install and you'll see that, hey, it installed no problem. So definitely upgrading from version 14 to 20 is definitely beneficial. So with all that, we want to make sure that we do npm. And basically what I want to do right now is I essentially want to hit start and let's see what happens. It's going to ask you again for that port. We're going to say yes, and let's see what happens. All right, so this normally takes a second or two just for it to kind of run up. And there we go. We have our Tailwind properly connected. Everything is working the way it should be, as well as clicking. So when we click on this, this works perfectly. So everything works the way that I wanted it to. All right, so here's a question I have for you before I end this video. Do you think Tailwind CSS is better than Bootstrap? I know I asked this question in my previous video, but drop it in the comments below. I truly want to know your answer to that as well. All right, so with that said, thanks so much for watching. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe button. I do post videos like this on a weekly, daily, monthly basis. And with that, see you again.